Hello everyone, welcome to Lucid Study. This is Vivek. Today in class 10 under the NEET Foundation series in chapter 2, we are going to talk about some very interesting things. What are those interesting things? We'll talk about that now. Have you ever seen a living organism? Of course, we are a living organism, so no need to see any other living organism. Okay, even assuming that you have seen some other living organism, have you ever seen what happens to that living organism? Of course, the one important thing that differentiates a living organism from a non-living entity is actually the movement. In order to make that movement happen, there are a lot of activities, there are a lot of processes that are taking place inside the living organism. It might be a human being, it might be a tiger, it might be a lion, it might be any other animal. But remember, there are a lot of activities and chemical processes that are happening inside the body. Whatever the activities that are taking place inside the body, they have a specific purpose to do. They have a specific function to perform. And what are these all things considered as? Well, now you will get to know all those things. We are talking something called control and coordination. Control and coordination. What is actually control? What is coordination? What consists of control and coordination? What are the systems that are involved in the control and coordination of a human being in particular? We'll talk about all those things in detail in this particular chapter. We know environment is not constant. It changes continuously. In fact, if you compare it with the real time, we know that there are 4 seasons. Not all the 4 seasons are the same. We have summer, we have rainy season, we have winter and autumn, or else you can say the spring. Each and every season has different environmental conditions. As and when the environment conditions change, even our body also changes. So there are some changes that are happening in the environment as well, to which living organisms respond. The thing that living organism responds to is nothing but called as stimuli, or in singular form it is called as stimulus. When you talk about stimuli, what are the different type of stimuli that living organisms does give? When we talk about the examples, living organisms do respond to heat, cold, sound, smell, taste, touch, pressure, gravity, water. All these are different phenomena where living organisms respond to stimulus. But how do they respond? That's an important question. When we talk about that, living organisms respond to stimuli in the form of body movements. When we talk about living organisms responding to heat, how do they respond? They sweat a lot. When we talk about how do living organisms smell, they do it with the nose. And how do living organisms respond with respect to the taste? They have the gustatory factors or the gustatory receptors. With the help of all those things, they will be able to respond. And what are these receptors and what are the other systems that we will be having? What are the important organs? We'll be talking about all those things in detail in the later part of the chapter. We got to know that response that the living organisms give to the changes in the environment is called as stimuli. Then what is coordination? When we talk about coordination, for a proper response to a stimulus, many organs in the body should work together. Now, what does that mean? When we say that our body sweat with response to the heat, there are a lot of organs that are working for that. When we say that organs are working together, or else when organ systems are working in order to make sure that the living organism is able to adapt or adjust to the environmental conditions, that's what you call it as coordination. The working together of various organs. It might be organs of 2 different organ systems, or it might be the organs of one organ system. When we talk about the working together of various, it's not one, multiple organs in an organism to produce a proper response to a stimulus. When a stimulus is being created, being induced from the environmental condition, and when there is a response from the living organism, that's what we call as a stimulus. And when there is a proper response to a stimulus, that's what you call it as coordination. And how does a proper response is given to the stimulus, which we call it as coordination? By making sure how the organs are working together. We got to know what is a stimuli. It is the response the living organisms give to the environmental conditions. And we also got to know what is coordination. The working of various organs together to make sure that they give a proper response to the stimuli is called as coordination. When we talk about the control and coordination in animals, it is done by different organ systems. And what are those organ systems? They are nervous system and endocrine system. Nervous system and endocrine system together constitute the control and coordinating system of the animals. When we talk about the control and coordinating system of plants, we have plant hormones, or else you can also call them as phytohormones as well, which are chemical substances which look after the control and coordination in plants. Remember, in animals, it is the nervous system and the endocrine system. In plants, it is the plant hormones or the phytohormones. We got to know when we talk about control and coordination, and that too with respect to animals, it is taken care by the nervous system and the endocrine system. Now you might get a question. Why do we need a nervous system in the first place? When we talk about the need for nervous system, it is very important to know that with the help of our sense organs, we are informed about the outside world. When we talk about sense organs, what are the different sense organs we have? The skin, the ears, the eyes, the nose, the tongue, all these are called as the sense organs through which you can feel the outside world. When you see through your eyes, you can see what's happening. You can hear what's happening around the world with your ears. You can taste different food materials with your tongue. You can feel different objects with your skin. And if there are no sense organs, you won't be able to get to know what's there in the world. You won't be able to get to know the outside world. That's why it is very important that we need to have a nervous system where all these sense organs are a part of it. And it controls and regulates the vital activities of our body. Now, what do we mean by vital activities? Vital means important. The nervous system controls and regulates the important systems, important activities, important processes of the body which are involuntary. That is very important to know. There are systems which work involuntary as well. When we talk about nervous system, it looks after those systems where involuntary actions are taking place. When we talk about one such involuntary action, which is breathing, even though sometimes we do realize that we are breathing, even though we sometimes realize that we are inhaling and exhaling, this is something which I had done voluntary, but normally we don't focus on breathing. We do the different activities. Like right now I am talking something and explaining you whether we need the nervous system or not, or if at all we need, why is it very important that nervous system is a must for living organisms. I am not focusing on the breathing. So what does this nervous system do? It controls and regulates the vital body system or the important body systems which are involuntary. And it enables us to remember information and reason out. When we talk about the nervous system, why is it very important? Because you will get to know what are the different parts that are involved in the nervous system. But remember, when we talk about nervous system, it enables us to remember the information. When you remember information, you get to know a lot of things. When you know a lot of things, you start thinking more, you start reasoning more, which is good, which is bad, which is right, which is wrong, which is big, which is small, which is right, which is left, which is north, which is south, which is east, which is west, who is a male, who is a female, what is this, what is that. You will be able to reason out each and everything. And if there is no nervous system, remember, you won't be able to do that. And that's why it is very important to have nervous system in living organisms. And remember, when we talked about the need for nervous system, we got to know that it controls and regulates the vital activities of our body, and that too which are involuntary. If it can control and regulate involuntary actions, then what about the voluntary actions? You might have got the question, right? In fact, let me tell you, nervous system also look after all the voluntary activities that we do. Now you might get a question. Okay, sir, we got to know that the need for nervous system is very much essential. It has to be there. As we got to know, nervous system looks after the involuntary actions. Nervous system looks after all the voluntary actions. It makes us sure that we remember all the information and we reason out things. But what is this voluntary action? What is this involuntary action? When we talk about voluntary actions, they are something which are doing consciously. When we talk about involuntary actions, they are the activities which are taking place without our conscious effort. When we talk about breathing, we don't normally realize whether we are breathing or not. We don't consciously think whether we are breathing or not. It keeps happening. Do we know whether our heart is breathing or not? It is an involuntary action. It keeps happening every now and then. But when I say I have to lift my hand, this is a voluntary action because I wanted to lift the hand. And if I don't want to put it back in the normal position, I will keep it as it is. And that's what we call it as voluntary action. And remember, if nervous system can take care of all the involuntary actions, it can also take care of all the voluntary actions as well. And that's why it is very, very important, and that's why there is a need for nervous system in order to make sure it regulates, it controls, it coordinates the processes of living organisms. When we were talking about coordination, we got to know in animals it is taken care by the nervous system and the endocrine system. And when we talk about the coordination in plants, there are chemical substances which are called as plant hormones or phytohormones, which looks after that. Now we will be talking about coordination in animals. As we already know, when we talk about coordination in animals, the control and coordination is done by two systems which are called as the nervous system and the endocrine system. And when we talk about the nervous system, what are the important organs that constitute the nervous system? The brain, the spinal cord, and all the nerves which are there, all these three together constitute the nervous system. The brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves, all these three constitute the nervous system. When we were talking about stimuli, we got to know that it is the response given by the living organism to the environmental condition. And in order to give a response, first it has to get the stimuli. For that, our body or the organisms have something called as receptors. Now, what are these receptors? How many types of receptors are there? We'll talk about that. When we talk about receptors, these are the sense organs. As the name suggested, they are the sense organs. They are able to sense the stimulus. They are able to receive the signals. They are able to receive the stimulus and pass the message to the brain or spinal cord through the sensory nerves. When we talk about sense organs, as we already got to know that there are 5 sense organs like the eyes, ears, nose, tongue and the skin, which help us to sense different things. And when we do something, or when we see, hear, taste, smell and touch something, it goes to the brain or the spinal cord and it sends back the signals so that there is a response to the stimulus given. And in order to make sure that the stimulus goes to the brain, there are sensory nerves. And when we talk about the receptors, as we got to know, they are nothing but the sensory organs. So when we talk about how many organs are there, we got to know that there are 5 sense organs and they have been categorized into different type of receptors. When we talk about the type of receptors, we have photoreceptors, phonoreceptors, olfactory receptors, gustatory receptors and tangoreceptors. Now, what is this photoreceptors, phonoreceptors, olfactory receptors, gustatory receptors and tangoreceptors mean? Let me tell you. When we talk about photoreceptors, they are the receptors which are in the eyes, and what do? They detect light. We know that photo means light. So the eyes have these photoreceptors which detect the light. And when you talk about phonoreceptors, phono means sound, something which receives the sound. And when you talk about that, it is present in the ear which detect the sound. And when you talk about olfactory receptors, it is present in the nose, and what do? They detect smell. They detect the smell. And when you talk about the gustatory receptors, what do? They are present in the tongue. And what does tongue do? It helps in tasting the food. And when you talk about the 5th one, it is tangoreceptors. Now, what does tangoreceptors do? They are present in the skin and they help to detect the touch. Whenever you touch something, it helps you to detect it. And that's how the different type of receptors. Photoreceptors help to detect light, phonoreceptors help to detect sound, olfactory receptors help to detect smell, gustatory receptors help us to detect taste, and tangoreceptors help us to detect the touch. And after receptors, now we will talk about effectors. Now, what does effectors mean? They are the muscles and the glands which respond to the information. As we know, they are receptors which are nothing but the sensory organs which take the information, which receive the information and sends it to the brain or the spinal cord. Now, what are these effectors? They are the muscles or the glands that respond to the information from the brain and the spinal cord through the motor nerves. When we talked about the receptors, it was passed, the signal was passed with the help of the sensory nerves. When we were talking about the receptors, we got to know it was sensory nerves and the stimulus was sending to the brain or the spinal cord. And now a response is given back to the stimulus via the motor nerves from the brain or the spinal cord. And who does it? It is the muscle and the glands who does it. Hence they are called as effectors. And when we talk about sensory nerves, as we have already know that they are responding to the stimulus given. They are able to feel the stimulus. They are the ones who send the signals to the brain or the spinal cord. That's what the sensory nerves do. They are the nerves which carry the information from the receptors, whether it might be a photoreceptor, phonoreceptor, gustatory receptor, olfactory receptor or tangoreceptor. Whatever they have received, that is sent to the brain or the spinal cord by these sensory nerves. And then what is motor nerve? When we talk about motor nerves, they are the nerves which carry the information from the brain and the spinal cord to the effectors. As we already know, what are the effectors? They are the muscles and the glands. And what do? They respond to the information given by the brain and the spinal cord in order to the stimulus that has been given in the first place. So when we talk about receptors, it is associated with the sensory nerves. And when we talk about the effectors, it is associated with the motor nerves. We got to know when we talk about control and coordination, and that too in animals, it is taken care by the nervous system and the endocrine system. And when we talk about the nervous system, with respect to the animals, we got to know it consists of the brain, the spinal cord and the nerves. And we have also talked about the receptors, effectors and what are sensory nerves and motor nerves. Now it is time that we need to talk about the human nervous system. And remember, human is also an animal. When we talk about the human nervous system, what are the parts of the human nervous system? It has been categorized into two, which is CNS and PNS. Now you might ask me, sir, what is CNS and what is PNS? Let me tell you. CNS is the short form of central nervous system and PNS is the short form of peripheral nervous system. When we talk about central nervous system, what does it constitute? The central nervous system constitutes the brain and the spinal cord. Only these two parts, the brain and the spinal cord, are considered as the parts of the central nervous system. And when we talk about the PNS, which is the short form of peripheral nervous system, what are the parts that constitutes the PNS? The parts which consist of the PNS are the cranial nerves which are arising from the brain and the spinal nerves which are arising from the spinal cord. The cranial nerves which are coming out from the brain and the spinal nerves which are coming from the spinal cord. These two are constituted, or these two are considered as a part of the peripheral nervous system. Brain and spinal cord are the part of the central nervous system, CNS. The cranial nerves coming from the brain and the spinal nerves coming from the spinal cord are considered as the PNS or the peripheral nervous system.